Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Adi Achint. I have Lieutenant General Narasimhan with me, who's probably one of the leading experts in terms of understanding the Chinese mind. Now, I'm going to ask him a very simple question. The most credible threat, personally, that's my opinion, I may be horribly wrong, but the most credible threat that comes from China is not the military threat, but is the asymmetrical warfare capabilities of the Chinese. Talking about the three warfare strategy, talking about all sorts of nefarious things they do behind the dark curtain or behind the red curtain, if I may. So let's try and understand what are the kind of threats that the Chinese can pose to us, and are these threats going to be localized, or can the Chinese actually put the entire country on the fritz? Let's find out. Sir, good afternoon and welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Adi. It's a pleasure to be on your show all the time. And this is the third time I'm appearing, and thanks for this honor.
Pleasure's all mine, sir. So I wanted to ask you, the Chinese inculcate this asymmetric warfare as a part of their warfare strategy. Um, and what would be the reason for this? What is the thought process before we get into what all they do? What is the thought process behind this kind of a addition, this kind of a policy?
See, it is a simple logic. The thing is, in your earlier appearances on this particular channel, I had mentioned about you. If you want to understand what Chinese are doing today, you'll have to go back in history, then come now to the present, and then look at the future. Similarly, I will do this for this also, for the asymmetric warfare also. Please look at the writings which Sun Tzu had done long time ago. It's known as Sun Tzu's Pingfa, which is the art of war, is what they call. Wherein he said the art of winning war is not to fight it, or without winning. Sorry, the art of winning war is to win without fighting it. Is what he said. What he implied at that time was to break down the will of the opponent and the adversary to ensure that he doesn't put up a fight. That means cognitive warfare and all other kind of asymmetric capability that we talk about today. Some of them have actually advanced because of science and technology, but otherwise, this thought process is not new in China at least. So the thought process is something that has been existing for a long period of time. And Adi talked about the three warfare strategy. Three warfare strategy came up somewhere in 2003, 2004. But before that, when the two colonels wrote, Colonel Chao Liang and Colonel Wang Xiangshui, wrote the book called Unrestricted Warfare in 1999, they talked about a number of issues which deals with the asymmetric warfare. The thinking at that time was to look at US. US was a more powerful an adversary or a person whom they want to ape and who want to reach that capabilities. And so, if you have to take on a more powerful person or a more powerful country, then the only way you can do that is by resorting to asymmetric warfare. Today, of course, asymmetric warfare has actually evolved into a lot of other things like gray zone warfare, multi-domain warfare. Whole lot of terminologies are coming. But the thought process is simple. If you want to take on an adversary who is stronger than you, you can't actually do in the kinetic mode and try to win that conflict. The way you can do that is to do this kind of an asymmetric warfare. I can talk about a number of them. In the next, I'll just open it up for the questions from Adi, and then I'll cover those. The thing that we need to understand is there are a number of ways in which it can happen. And the asymmetric warfare is something which is not going to happen only during the period of conflict. It is happening during peacetime. It will happen during pre-conflict time. It will happen during the conflict, and it will also happen during the post-conflict. So this is a continuum that we need to understand. So this is the kind of asymmetric warfare that we are talking about. And so if we have to face this, then you need to understand China's actually thought process towards doing this asymmetric warfare. Though it was actually coined for taking on stronger adversaries, that can also be extended to either people who have got equal capacities and capabilities or people who have got less capacities and capabilities, which can give them dividends which are beyond the kind of effort that needs to be put in for a kinetic kind of a conflict. So asymmetric warfare is something which is happening now. It will happen in future, and we need to understand this in that particular kind of sense.
Absolutely, sir. And as a matter of fact, when you read the 36 stratagems which comes out from this whole period of the warring era, it's very interesting because these are, the way it is, the logic is very, very simple, but the way it has been framed is very interesting. Is that itself kind of a cover for this? Because, cross the
It's
cross the river in the open darkness, and eh,
across the river by feeling the
yeah,
stones, etc. So there are a number of them actually.
yeah,
Uh, it is something similar to what Kautilya also says: the
yes,
enemy is your friend, etc., etc. A whole lot of other things are there. No, the point is simple. Even during the warring states period, I mean, we talked about the 100-year marathon, which Michael
yes.
Pillsbury has written in one of our earlier conversations. He talks about that emperor's cauldron. How do you
Hmm.
how you look at the emperor's cauldron and see what his capabilities are? You're just trying to feel him out. So those kind of things have already been existing in the Chinese mind. And as I have been saying all over wherever I've been speaking, I've been saying this. They have been teaching these lessons to senior armed forces officers in the National Defense University of China. So that is something which has been even taught to them today, and they do tend to follow what has happened in the past. So
Hmm.
therefore, we need to understand the asymmetric warfare capabilities of China, and not only that, we also need to understand how it will get applied on us over a period of time. So this is something that I think we need to understand. Let me talk a few more about what kind of asymmetric
Sure.
warfare
Yes.
capabilities can come in. Okay. First one is, of course, the computer network operations, which is known as CNO in the Chinese thinking. Computer network operations can be both offensive and defensive. We have known this. It deals with cyber capabilities on which China is extremely strong. And in fact, I had given a presentation on this in 2013, way back 10 years ago. I had given a presentation when I was in service still there, even then at that time. And I had given a presentation on the asymmetric warfare capabilities of China, wherein if you go back and look at the IW capabilities that the Chinese have developed over a period of time, they have been carrying out a number of exercises within themselves. I mean, simulating the kind of adversaries that they are about to face or they're likely to face, and then how to handle them. What kind of hacker groups which have been created in China, the kind of resources that have been allocated to this. It's a huge kind of a study by
Yeah.
itself.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
computer network operations is one form of asymmetric warfare that we need to be looking at when we deal with China. The second one is the space. Space was not so much in the eye or in the face some time ago, but it is more and more becoming right in the face kind of a capability that China has started doing. And starting from the 2007 was the first 11th of January 2007, if I remember the date correctly, was the first day or first trial of their first testing of their anti-satellite capability that started. And thereafter, of course, a number of things have been done. A number of things have been happening in space. Not only the reconnaissance part, not only the surveillance part, it is also the kinetic, it is also the particle beams, it is also the robotic arm maneuver which they did a year and a half ago. So these are things that are actually creating a kind of capability which China has at this point in time, which they can actually bring to bear against any kind of adversary. That is the second capability. The third capability is the climate warfare. People only talk about Brahmaputra and water and Parichu and the water, etc. But there's a lot of research and a lot of activity has been going on in China to how to deal with climate as a source of asymmetric warfare. Like, for example, 500 odd fuel burners have been installed in Tibet to ensure that the clouds that get accumulated over Tibet are diverted to the northern parts of China where water is scarce. That is one. Second, they also try to change the ionosphere in addition to in addition to um, the in addition to their own capability, they also joined hands with Russia. In June 2018, they did an exercise over a Russian territory, wherein they tried to modify the ionosphere to the tune of 1,26,000 square kilometers. It is available on the net. You can see it. It is there. 1,26,000 square kilometers of area was affected. While Russians did the test, the Chinese were actually providing them the support to do this. So this is another thing that you need to be worried about. They also have something known as a Tianhe project, wherein they try to divert the clouds to the areas where they need. So you find climate warfare is another one. Don't be only concentrating on the rivers that are flowing from China into India, but you need to look at climate as a asymmetric warfare capability that they are developing. The other thing that you need to look at is the water resources. I talked about don't only look at the rivers, but then the river diversion projects is one aspect where it could deny you water, deny you part of the
Mm,
water, because
mm,
majority of the water in Brahmaputra flows into Brahmaputra through distributaries that are in the Indian territory. However, some amount of water can be still be diverted from the Great Bend area where the Yarlung Sanko, which is the Brahmaputra, which flows from west to east, takes that Great Bend and then comes into India. That is the area that they are trying to divert, and that can create some kind of water issues. The other way the water can be used is the kind of fear that one had in 2004 in Parichu, where because of a landslide, the water got accumulated,
yeah,
and if they had opened up that particular accumulated water, it will inundate the villages, etc., which are downstream. So that is water as a weapon could also be used, because China is actually upper riparian state and we are a middle riparian state. So that could be used as something. Then the information blockade and things like that, and subconventional warfare. Subconventional warfare is simple. Anything that is not a direct conflict, which is below that threshold, is subconventional. And you find that it could happen, like, for example, people are blaming China for what is happening in Manipur. And that may not be true, but the factor is the fact of the matter is China was involved in supporting the insurgencies in the Northeast in the earlier times. That is from 1956 onwards till about 1980, 78 to 80. Even now, there may be something that is existing in the very minimal kind of form, but that is another thing that you need to be looking at. And the other interesting factor that you need to have look at is, these two colonels who wrote this book, Unrestricted Warfare, in 1999, they talked about a number of things. Okay. They talked about financial warfare. They talked about smuggling warfare. They talked about cultural warfare, drug warfare, media and fabrication, technology warfare, resources, psychological warfare, network warfare, international law, environmental warfare, economic aid warfare, the whole lot of range, whole lot of spectrum
yeah.
of what could be done to your adversary to make sure that he weakens and he loses the will to fight is something that they aim at by doing this asymmetric warfare. And if there are any further questions, of course, I'll be happy to answer.
Absolutely. So this is I mean, a very interesting breakdown with regards to what all are the capabilities. See, the challenge that I see of this is it's damn difficult to counter this because it's most of it is done in the gray zone.
True, but then what stops us from doing the same gray zone?
Yeah, well, that's a fight that I think a lot of us that's a crib that a lot of us have with
No,
regards
but the
to.
thing is probably we're not seeing what is happening in the gray zone domain. Because
Yeah, yeah.
if at all you are able to see it, then it is not a gray zone
Then
anymore.
it's not gray zone. Yes, sir. But the factor is, see, at the end of it, the Chinese people can see all this when they do realize that these are the capabilities that their government possesses and the kind of stuff that they can do. Now, when you talk about this, there's also a population subversion, which is something which is I think, the most dangerous, because at the end of it, the Chinese do try it. There's no question about it. They'll create they'll support narratives which are against a particular country. I mean, we saw what has happened in Nepal. We've seen what happened in Sri Lanka. We've seen, uh, the building narrative in Pakistan. You've seen it in the Solomons. Uh, it may not be ideological, it may be financial, but that's another big threat where entire country has been kind of subverted, sir.
You see, this is the this is the kind of feeling one gets,
Sir,
that China has been all pervasive. They have been able to do this. They have been able to do that. But tell me, have they been able to do that kind of influencing operations in India? They
I
tried.
would come to that actually as a next question.
Okay, fine. I'll leave it. But let me tell you about even Pakistan and Nepal. Okay.
Sir.
Even in Nepal, I had gone to Nepal about 7, 8 months back with a delegation and interacted with everybody else. And at that time, of course, a delegation from China was also present in Nepal. The underlying feeling is everybody understands that China is trying to interfere in the internal issues of Nepal. Okay, they keep quiet maybe because of the kind of assistance they want to get from them, or because of the fear that China could do something to them adversely, and so therefore they tend to, I would say, just
Be
move over the
careful.
surface of it. Okay,
Hmm, hmm.
the issue is even in Pakistan. Look at the kind of opposition that you get to see against the Chinese in terms of even on the CPEC, China Pakistan Economic Corridor. You found opposition from Sindh, which is actually saying that the Chinese have taken away most of our jobs on the CPEC corridor. On the Balochistan side, you find an opposition coming up to the Chinese to say that okay, nothing is happening in Balochistan, though Gwadar is happening, but nothing else is happening in Balochistan.
True.
There are issues related to security of the Chinese working in Pakistan. So it is not all that their influence operations have been working very effective. But our studies earlier have indicated one thing very clearly, that wherever the Chinese diaspora is more in a country, you find their influence operations are that much more effective. And
Aha.
since we do not have a large diaspora of the Chinese in India, you have this advantage that their influence operations will not be so effective. So this is a phenomena that many people don't understand. Because if you do detailed studies on this, then you get to know. And on the influence operations of China, which you're talking about, there are many studies that have been done. Please look at the IRACM France study, which is about 600 pages. I'm not talking about these studies done by the triple CS because those are classified, and so I can't talk about them. But there are in the open domain, there are a number of studies that have been done, and they give a lot of understanding and a lot of takeaways from those studies. Tells you that there are many things that can be done to probably ensure that the Chinese influence operations do not succeed in the future.
Interesting. Now, you brought out India. I have a little bit of a different question to ask you, sir. Of course, India is not a homogeneous society. We've got a messy democracy, probably a fault line every 5 miles. Fair enough. But don't so many fault lines and so many messed up, equations, along with so many different thought processes, make it a greater challenge to actually subvert a society? Because one formula probably works in one little town or a state. Just for example's sake, Manipur, okay, fair enough. Let's say for example that the Chinese are fully fueling and funding it. That's just one state. So does it actually, what will be the credibility of such an operation, and how would the Chinese kind of use it on India, sir?
You see, that is the problem that the Chinese will face. Okay, the problem that they will face is that you've got different languages. All of
Correct.
them don't follow English. All of them are not on the net. All of them are not actually using the kind of network that people expect to do.
Hmm.
So that is a difficulty that you will find. Many people were using TikTok. I mean, earlier, or the Chinese app, that
Yes,
short
sir.
video clip app.
Mm.
You will be surprised to see how they were operating. They were operating in 12 of the regional languages. Okay, they understood that the mainstream Hindi and mainstream English may
Not gonna
not
work.
reach
Mm.
to a large population. So
Mm.
what they did, they started going into the regional languages. And when we analyze that content, you had some issues with those content, and that is why, because of security and strategy related issues, that safety related issues, that TikTok was banned. Okay, so you need, that is the problem that anybody who wants to influence the Indian mind would feel. Most of us who read the English version of, say, newspapers and magazines and other things and watch news in English will have a different view. But that is not the majority view in India. If you
Absolutely.
want to access the majority view in India, you will have to look at the Hindi belt. You will have to look at the other belts that are more actually in numbers to shape that opinion. That is extremely difficult. So this is something that, which makes our own society, the Indian society, more insular than many other societies which are homogeneous, which can be approached at a particular point in time.
Hmm. I mean, see, that's the most interesting to me because I was thinking and I said, okay, fair enough. Let's say the Chinese want to target India. How? I mean, on what? You can say, okay, Hindu, Muslim. There also it'll be located in a certain area because that area has gotten a little pissed off. The rest of the
You
country
see,
will say, "Nahin, yaar."
The Hindu Muslim card, Chinese will probably not use it very well, basically
Mhm.
because they have their own problems in
Backfire.
their country.
Yeah, yeah,
So if you do something on those lines, it could fall back on you.
yeah.
So they have to be extremely careful about selecting the themes on how to influence the Indian mind or how to influence everything else. So
Sure.
if you do something which is already you are vulnerable to, it will come back to you.
Yeah,
So you
yeah.
don't want to raise an issue and then get something back onto you again. It's saying like, don't throw a stone if you're living in a glass house. Right.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
that is extremely complicated to identify the
Yeah.
kind of topics that you need to be pushing. What the Chinese have been doing, you can see, Chinese embassy in India hiring,
Mhm.
full page kind of advertisements and
The Hindu. Yeah.
put out put out put out statements by the ambassador, etc., etc. It's open secret. I'm not saying anything secret. It's all in the open. So
Hmm.
those are the kind of where you find that they will project what all China has been doing well for India, what all have been trying to do for
Hmm.
improving the relationship with India. So this is something that they are trying to do. I don't think they have criticized India in any manner in all those pages. If you see it, they are only trying to substantiate or only try to prove a point to say that no, we have been doing something good to you. That is the kind of thing messaging that you get. You
Hmm.
don't get to see a messaging that there is a problem in India in those pages.
Yeah. Not there. Yes, sir.
Okay, so those
Hmm.
are the kind of things. This is a very serious subject. People need to analyze it in a lot more detail to see as to how these things can become effective and then take counter measures to that.
No, absolutely. Absolutely, sir. When you look at a homogeneous sort of a society as the US, creating a polarized environment there would be much easier. Would you agree, sir? Which is more or less bent
See,
on two or three lines at the end of it.
if you want to see a homogeneous society, look at China. Okay, 91% are Hans,
Yeah. Well.
right? The balance 55 communities that you have in China, they're
Hmm.
all within that 7-8%. Okay, you're talking about US. US, I don't think is a very homogeneous society. You find African Americans in a different group. You find the Caucasian Americans in one group. You find people from the South American countries who are coming into US into another group. The immigrant population from India, China, and everywhere else into another group.
So.
I don't think it is such a homogeneous society. But the advantage of that country is that everybody will understand English.
Yeah.
Everybody will be able to be, you know, to be
Influenced.
approached for various
Hmm.
things. That
Hmm.
is the advantage in going to US. But countries like India, countries like any other country, which is not homogeneous, are going to be that much more difficult to, be tinkered around with.
So we also note something called financial warfare, and this is something which I people have just probably recently started talking about. hostile takeovers. Of course, we in India are quite protected with regards to Chinese money, and we've also got laws where a Chinese company cannot own more than 51%, and that's, I think, by this year end, all the high presence of the Chinese firms need to go off. But this financial warfare is a challenge at the end of it, and especially, let's say, for a country like States, where the Chinese own a large quantum of the debt.
You see, Chinese owning large quantum of the debt works both ways.
It
Okay.
does, of course.
See, China is having about 1.1 trillion in their bonds,
So,
approximately, give or take
so
a couple of hundred billion, millions this way, that way. It keeps varying. That's why it's difficult to put a perfect figure on it. Okay. During COVID, it reduced a bit, then it will come up a little bit, it will keep happening. See, if you withdraw, suppose today, think of China withdrawing the entire $1.1 trillion from US. Then what happens to China? Where do they deploy that money? How do they already they are holding $3.1 trillion in foreign exchange reserves?
hmm,
Okay. So at one point in time they went up to 3.9 trillion. Then
3.9,
what do you
yes.
do with that money? How
Hmm,
managing that money itself, managing that foreign exchange reserves itself is going to be a huge challenge. So that is one. Second thing, I'm sure the US is also aware of this. That what happens in case tomorrow China says, okay, I'm shifting everything into euros, or I'm shifting everything into, say, something else,
hmm,
or the BRICS currency that is being talked about. That is, people have said that Russians have said that it is going to come up in August. So I'm sure the Americans are aware of it. They also will be exercising their minds as to how to overcome this problem. So the
hmm,
issue that comes financial warfare is it is not going to be only in terms of holding debt. Like for example, during COVID, we found a lot of companies, mainly from China, coming into the fintech and digitech markets, and then particularly in the startup field. So those are the kind of, and if you stop something from happening like that, they find the other way around.
yeah.
You look at Ola, you look at Paytm, you look at many other companies like this, Zomato, Swiggy, all of them have got Chinese investment. So the thing that we need to look at is, while a free market economy will allow this to happen to a particular extent. Like for example, HDFC, that a free market, like for example, HDFC I was talking about, right?
So,
When the Chinese investments came up to almost 1%, there was a huge outcry in this country. The Chinese are trying to capture the market, HDFC Bank. But that is a common accepted practice in the entire international economy. That investing in other central banks or other private banks is a common
wise
thing.
thing. Hmm.
Sorry,
It's
yeah, it's a
it's a
common
wise
thing.
thing as well. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the thing is that while that may be legal, what you need to be looking at the kind of adverse reaction that it could get in a country like ours, particularly when they are looking at startups in technology, startups in fintech, startups in digitech. That is something that we need to be looking at, and that was being looked at, by the way. It is not that we let it go like that. It has been looked at, and adequate measures are being taken. The problem is, you put a stop something like that, you'll find another way to come in.
Mhm.
That is how the system works. So
Yeah,
you
yeah,
need to be constantly,
yeah.
you need to be constantly observing this. You need to be constantly observing which route can somebody come in illegally or even legally, which could be hurting you.
Hmm.
So that is something that is a constant watch and a constant, I would say, effort to recognize what is happening and to take preventive measures on that. So this is something which is an ongoing process. You can't just say, okay, I've stopped him from coming and rest on your laurels. He'll find another way to come.
Hmm.
So that is something is a constant kind of a cat and mouse game, which goes on all the time.
Yeah, we did hear them creating shell companies in Maldives, in Malaysia, in Dubai, and all that stuff, and trying to kind of nudge in. So, coming towards the end of this, I mean, it's a captivating sort of a discussion, because at the end of it, you kind of wonder, yeah, ladna hai to you come in the front and fight. Yeah, what is this, tinkering around all over the place? But in any
That will
case,
never happen. You see, all modes, all means, all resources available to you will come into play in case of a in case of an adversary. Gone are the days, when two forces were standing right in front of each other and they
Hmm.
start fighting. The old kings and others used to do it. Okay, that is supposed to be the sort of bravery. But
Yeah.
then treachery came into it, so it changed the character of war. So the
Yeah.
character of war will keep changing. The nature may remain the same, being violent, etc. But the character of war will keep changing, and these are all tenets of changing character of war. And the point I wanted to mention in the initial stage, I said it, and I'm saying it again. We should be aware that it is happening even presently when we are not in a state of conflict. And it will happen during the pre conflict stage, rather more.
Yeah.
And during the conflict stage, it will be even more. And during post conflict stage, it may come down in terms of its I would say its capabilities and capacities. So the thing is, it is a constant, and you need to be aware of it right through, and not only wake yourself up when the when the conflict is about to start. That
Sure.
is the point that we need to take home. And we all, I'm not only saying armed forces, I'm not only saying government, I'm not only saying you and me, every one of us need to be conscious of this fact. That is the way probably we'll be able to face this.
Absolutely. So, last question is, when I would say something that affects the maximum amount of people, right, is propaganda. And as a civilian living in society, I think that's the most concerning thing for us. Fake news, disinformation, misinformation, propaganda. Chinese seem to be quite good at it. Uh, have you seen India today probably learning the art of deciphering propaganda? Because I mean, for example, that news that came out some time ago. Oh, Chinese pitched two tents, and when India objected, they ran away. Now, this probably about 2 years ago would have gone nuts and bolts. Today, people say, "Yeah, these idiots, they're like that only. They can't fight, so they'll just keep on doing this. Our army is there; they'll handle it."
You see, that is
Has
a
that become the current purpose?
no, but that may be because of information overload that people are actually been getting used to over a period of time. But
So,
the fact remains that there was a report that not two tents, four tents were pitched. Three of them have been removed, and the
yeah.
fourth one was being removed. Is the news I saw in the morning.
Mhm.
The thing is, the fact that we need to understand it is happening. Yes, army will handle it. That's a different issue. But if you want to understand the Chinese, then you need to know that this is happening, and that is where the crux of this issue lies. That you should be
Mm.
aware of what is happening, and you should be able to decipher exactly as to why it is happening, and then take remedial measures to it. This is one simple case of tents. It's physically present there; it is visible.
So,
But asymmetric warfare will not be visible like this. Asymmetric warfare will not be; it is invisible.
yeah.
And therefore, you need to make extra effort to see what is happening around and then understand why it is happening and take remedial measures. And that is where the challenge lies. How quickly can you actually understand that this is happening and then take precautionary measures? That is something. And second thing is, a lot of education needs to be done to our people in the country, that these are the things that could happen, and this is what you need to watch out for, and how to ensure that there is a counter to that works out at some point in time. So that is something that we need to be constantly looking at.
I mean, what I wanted to ask you was basically not about the factor that these are happening, people are aware, sir, but I think the Chinese would have clicked videos and done a whole lot and created a movie and put it across, and people would have gotten impacted and kind of
I take your mind back to New Year of 2022, where they put the PLA soldiers somewhere and then said that they're standing in Galwan,
yeah,
and Indian army has to go physically there and say this is Galwan and we are here, and put out a counter video to that.
yeah,
So that is quite possible. What you're saying is absolutely possible. I'm not
yeah.
saying anything about that. That's perfectly a way to understand this.
I mean, it's interesting that this thing is there, but somewhere down the line, I think Tawang was a bit of a eye opener for all of us because we put out a video before they did, so one really saw. Uh, I won't say that we've learned, and I want to don't want to jump in dance and say, "Oh, bhaiya, India has learned" and all that. I don't think so. But I guess in one place we did take the overhand in terms of a propaganda sort of an outreach. And fair enough. I think let's learn a little more out of it. So, thank you so much. I mean, this is quite an eye opener of a discussion. You've given us, the audience, two books that we can read. One is, of course, The Unrestricted Warfare and the Three Warfare Strategy. And, of course, I brought out the 36 Stratagem that you very nicely explained as well. So, these are three books that one can read out of this particular show. As a matter of fact, sir, let me just say this, out of the group of people that I'm connected with, a lot of them a lot of them actually say that please ask sir to recommend books in every show so that we could start reading ourselves. And
Yeah.
so yeah, it's always a learning experience to talk to you, sir. Looking forward for many more in the future and understanding the mindset of China. Till then, sir, Jai Hind.
Thank you. Jay Hind.